Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
Blake, I have a question for you.
Yes.
If we fused, would our name be Blakel or Malake?
Malake, for sure.
Malake. Okay, welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. Today we're covering a Canadian film.
Yes, we've started. We've officially moved into anything but American movies for the next foreseeable future.
Woo!
And we're starting that with one of your favorite Canadian movies of all time, I think.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Last Night by Don McKellar.
Yeah, from 1998. This is a really cool movie, and I think that it's like just straight up criminally, like federally prosecutable, underrated.
I know, right? It's one of those, like a lot of Canadian movies. It's just a movie that no one has heard of or seen, but it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's also relatively hard to find. And I was going to say to start off this episode, too, that if you just clicked on this to find Last Night because you're having a hard time finding it, I'm just going to get the where you can find this movie right out of the way right now. This movie is really hard to find.
It certainly is.
You can find a link of it to a full YouTube video for this in our links below, because that's pretty much the only place you can watch it right now.
I think you and I watched it. I think we watched it on the same place last night then.
Probably.
Pun intended.
Yeah, I saw that there's a DVD available, but the DVD is like $90 on Amazon. And from what I understand, the quality, like the actual video quality, isn't great on the DVD. It's a bad render of it.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that the YouTube render of this movie is incredible, but I also think that's partially because of maybe the film that they were using.
Potentially. It's hard to say. As with a lot of Canadian movies, you can pretty well, if you're willing to do some digging, you can find it somewhere online for free. Just because, I remember my old film professor saying that, like, all Canadian directors have given up the hope of making money and they just want their movies seen somehow. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Although with this one, like, I feel like Last Night is a movie that would do really good numbers on something like Tubi.
Probably, yeah, or something like that.
Yeah. So Don
yeah.
McKellar, please just hard pitch this to Tubi, because I would love to see a good, like, upscaled version of this on Tubi.
A slightly remastered version, not some like weird illegal YouTube cut.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to give back to you, but $90 for the DVD is maybe a little too much.
Yeah, really. I mean, if you personally delivered the DVD and then would hang out with us for a little bit, like, I'd pay more than $90, but
that would be super cool. But that's here nor there. We should talk about what Last Night is.
Last Night. Would you, Blake, and our listeners like a quick elevator pitch?
I would love to hear it.
So, it is 6 p.m. and the world is going to end at midnight. So, Last Night is the story of everyone's last night on Earth. And we follow a group of very diverse characters and we see how they're choosing to live out basically their final 6 hours on this fucking planet.
Right.
So, yeah, our primary character is Patrick Wheeler, played by Don McKellar himself.
The writer and director.
The writer and director, and I'll just say he looks like a writer and director. And, wow, that's actually probably the sickest burn I've ever delivered to anyone. But no, he's cool. But basically, Patrick is he's an slightly down on his luck architect who's just incredibly burned out, jaded, exhausted. You kind of get the sense that, like, he's not too concerned about the impending demise of all humanity. So at the start of the movie, he attends a brief dinner with his family, and then he decides he wants to live out his final hours completely alone in his apartment, which is interesting, to say the least. But when he's on his way home, he happens across Sandra Oh's character, a young woman who is trying to get across town so that she can spend her final hours with her husband. But unfortunately, she had some vehicle trouble. And by that, I mean some hoodlums just flipped her car and rolled it down the street.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyways, that's it. It's a pretty simple setup, and it's one of my favorite types of stories, because it's like, I remember the creative director of The Last of Us, the video game, not the TV show, I forget his name, saying that like his personal philosophy for storytelling was simple plot, complex characters. And this movie fully embodies that philosophy.
Absolutely, very much agree.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite movies. I mean, not just one of my favorite Canadian movies, but one of like my favorite movies, period.
It's growing a lot on me as well. I don't know that it'll necessarily make my top 100 list later this year, but it's certainly like a movie that this is my second time viewing now, and it's a movie that I will also return to in the future.
Okay, cool.
Really, really like this one. Like, you pitched it a couple years ago when we did one of our first movie drafts, and your pitch of that in that episode was enough to get me to watch that one immediately. Above all the other movies you and Jason pitched, that was the one that I was like, oh, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Well,
yeah.
And now we're giving it the full VCR treatment.
Yeah, and I mean, for a movie that's about the end of the world and, as immediate to the end as you possibly could in a movie, this movie is strangely, like, at times very almost like upbeat, not quite upbeat, but it's kind of really endearingly funny.
It's quirky. It's kind of really, I wrote some notes for this movie, and I'm going to read one of them. It's that I just wrote, this is very much a Michael movie, because just like Michael, this movie is funny, but also sad, but also sweet.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything, and I think that, there's a lot of poignancy about kind of the topics that they cover, and like there's a lot of like topics that are covered in this relatively short movie. Like, this is an hour-and-a-half movie.
Yeah, it's like a tight 90.
Yeah, and it's a tight 90. Like, this movie moves at a really brisk pace. There's never really a dull moment in it at all. Like, there's never a point where I was like, my mind started to wander. I was just like fully fixated on everything happening in this one throughout. So characters of people you may know. So this is a funny one because on one hand, it's a Canadian movie. So you might think like, oh, who could possibly be in this low-budget Canadian movie? And on the other hand, I'm going to name 5 people who, apart from Don McKellar, which honestly, it's a tragedy that more people don't know who Don McKellar is, but everybody else has actually been in interesting things over the last like 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
So our first character is Patrick, like you said. He's a character that I think a lot of people relate to, or maybe I just relate to, which is funny. Like, he's a smart guy who's also just kind of embittered with the world at this point.
He's very, the word I would use to describe him is just disgruntled.
Yeah, but he's kind of smarmy too. Like, he's very sarcastic.
Yeah.
He's a character that I always gravitate towards in things. I would say he is almost like, there's a little bit of Ryan Reynolds in the character.
Yeah.
So
there certainly is.
Yeah. So I don't know. I like his performance quite a bit, actually. And Don McKellar, he's kind of a Canadian film and TV icon. Like, he's done a lot of screenwriting. But he's also acted in a few other movies, so you might have seen him in a couple of David Cronenberg movies, and more on David Cronenberg in a minute. But
Hello.
He appeared in Existence and most recently Crimes of the Future, which is really cool. And he also had some performances in some like Canadian TV shows like Odd Job Jack and Slings and Arrows.
I was so gonna bring up Odd Job Jack. I was gonna say, like, if you're like a man of our age who grew up in our neck of the woods, you've seen Odd Job Jack.
Exactly. So he's cool. He's been around for a long time. Like, he's part of, I think it was called the Toronto New Wave of cinema in like the 90s. So I'm sure you'll have more to talk about that later, since you actually studied that stuff and I'm just kind of here learning.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we'll move on from Don McKellar unless you have anything else you want to say about Don McKellar.
Not really. I just want to say that, like, I really admired his performance. Like, I was watching him and, like, I feel like this character could very, very easily be insufferable, but he's able to, like, sort of thread that line of, like, obnoxious and smarmy, but still somehow likable at the end of the day. Yeah.
100% agree. Like that's a tight line to walk, and plenty of other people have failed.
Yeah.
So the next biggest character is Sandra, like you mentioned already, played by Sandra Oh. I think Sandra Oh is like clear and above probably the most
recognizable face in this movie.
Yes, and she's also like hands down the best performance in this movie. Like she's definitely the most capable actor out of everybody here.
I mean, there's scenes where she's crying, and you're just like, it's my third time seeing this movie, and I just want to be like, do you need a hug? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah. There's just something about Sandra Oh that she's fantastic in everything she's in. She's, like I said, probably one of Canada's biggest actors of the last 20 years. Like she has
easily.
a major role in Grey's Anatomy. She was Eve in Killing Eve. She did some voice work for Turning Red, which is a movie that I think you really liked.
Oh, I've never seen that one, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Must have been your other girlfriend. She was also, she was Mark's mom in Invincible.
Oh, no way. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's around. She's keeping busy. And she's fantastic in this one. And, you know, if you're a fan of Sandra Oh even at all, like, I would highly recommend this just because it's a really cool early performance of hers that she's phenomenal. And she won awards for it, too. And then the other actors that I want to mention here, your mileage may vary on whether or not you've heard of them before, but I think there's some really cool performances here. So Craig, he's kind of the...
He's the man who has drinks.
He chooses to spend his last hours on Earth, and potentially even more than his last hours, as it's alluded to, exploring every sexual fantasy that he could have possibly fantasized about during his time on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta hand it to Craig. I mean, you know, like, this man knows what he wants and he goes for it.
Yes, absolutely. And he's played by Callum Keith Rennie. Do you actually know Callum Keith Rennie from anything else? Because I have a couple things.
I feel like I've heard the name now that I think about it.
So he plays number 2 in Battlestar Galactica, which is going to make me sound like a huge big nerd, but
I forgot you loved Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, all right.
Well, I watched The Expanse a few years ago, and I was like, this is exactly the kind of show for me. And so I did a little research after I finished that show, and I was like, what do I watch next? And everyone was like, you know what, Battlestar Galactica, for as much like it gets memed on now because of The Office, the first 2 seasons of that show are like actually incredible. So I watched it, very much agree. Like the first 2 seasons of that show are like gripping, absolutely gripping.
Okay.
And so he plays number 2 in that, so you'll know him very distinctly from that. He's also in Star Trek Discovery, which is a relatively new Star Trek show.
Aren't there like 5 Star Trek shows in production right now?
I can't keep track of all of the Star Trek.
Aren't we like, and I'm only tangentially aware of this, aren't we in like some kind of Star Trek renaissance right now?
I don't know if Star Trek ever died, honestly. Like,
oh, okay.
And it's kind of genuinely impressive, honestly. Like, you know, there's a tangent for Star Trek versus Star Wars. Like, Star Trek has been able to like stay semi-relevant for, I don't know, like 60, 70 years now.
I guess so, right? I also kind of admire that. It's like, oh, you don't like this Star Trek show? That's okay. There's 4 more coming out this week.
Yeah. True, right? Whereas Star Wars, you kind of like, I would argue there's like maybe 3 to 5 good Star Wars movies in the whole franchise, and TV shows inclusive in that.
I would argue that, yeah, there's like 3 to 5 good Star Wars movies, and then like 3 to 5 good Star Wars seasons of television.
Yeah.
Not counting the Clone Wars, which is actually phenomenal.
Yeah, I might just count the Clone Wars in that too, because I struggle to watch Star Wars TV shows these days. So
yeah,
and Star Wars anything, honestly. But that's a whole different tangent. So
subscribe to our second podcast where we stan Star Trek and we just shit on Star Wars.
So then we have another character who I don't think you mentioned in the plot summary, but there's a character named Duncan who is some sort of executive at a gas company in Toronto who he's essentially spending his last hours on Earth just calling different customers and assuring them that the gas will stay on until the very end.
Right, which it doesn't, by the way.
Spoilers.
Well, it's funny too. So like basically like we see this character, Duncan, sitting at his desk, going through the phone book and just crossing names off and just saying the same exact identical message each time. Like, thank you this is the gas company. Thank you so much for your like patronage, and we'll ensure that the gas stays on up till the bitter end. And it's funny because like watching this now, like 25, 30 years later, you're like, I feel like this could have been an email, but I guess like back in the day you had to call, and it's not like nowadays where you could like automate that either. Some poor bastard would have to sit there and call every single person individually.
Well, and I have thoughts about this character as well, and I'm actually starting to form more thoughts even now just talking about this character out loud. So we'll talk about him more in the deep dive because he's kind of an interesting character.
What I like about this movie in particular is that it's a tight 90 minutes and it's subtle, right?
Right.
It almost kind of reminds me, this is a weird comparison, it almost kind of reminds me of like Better Call Saul, where like not everything is fucking spelled out for you. You have to like think about it and like make inferences based on like the character's actions, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's not to say that these characters aren't heavily written, right? Or like are well written. Like every character, I feel like every performance knows what the character needs out of it.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's probably like a strong backstory written for each character. So I don't know. I think this is a really strongly written script. If I'm going to sell this movie at all, like I would actually sell it probably primarily on its script.
Oh, easily. The writing is phenomenal.
Absolutely. So Duncan is played by David Cronenberg, who is, maybe if he's not quite a household name, that's because you don't like horror movies.
It's because your house sucks.
He is one of the biggest Canadian filmmakers of the last 50 years. Like he does really, really gross body horror type films, so that's not everybody's cup of tea. Like,
do you remember that Rick and Morty episode where Rick accidentally turns the whole human race into mutants and they start calling them Cronenbergs?
Nice.
That's why.
Yeah. I actually haven't watched like a ton of his movies, but I watched the original Fly a few years ago, and I thought that it was one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
It made me want to shower after. I felt so dirty.
Yeah,
it's something. It's wild. So
he also did Videodrome with James Woods, which is another phenomenal movie.
Mm-hmm. That's on my list. We'll probably cover it this year, maybe, because now we're on a bit of a David Cronenberg tangent. He also has 2 kids who are phenomenal and coming up in the film scene as well. Like you and I watched his son's movie a couple of years ago, and I'm drawing a blank as to which one that was now. Oh my god! I gotta look this up.
It's another super disturbing movie. Yeah. So it's genetic. It's genetic. Yeah. Those morbid artistic sensibilities are genetic.
Yeah, Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. That's what it was, which is a movie that you and I both had a lot of thoughts on.
That almost cracked my top 5 last year, but
it almost cracked mine as well. Like I had to watch it twice because I was like, "There's something really, really good here," and I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Anyway, that's where you know David Cronenberg from. It's really cool to see him actually acting in a movie.
A surprisingly skilled actor too. I didn't do a lot of behind the scenes research, but apparently Don McKellar said that like David Cronenberg like really took the role seriously and like was really invested in it.
Yeah. He has like, I think he has one of the best scenes in the movie later on in the film.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then there's one, or I guess I'll also mention there's another character who's an employee working for him, and she has an interesting trajectory in this movie as well, and I have thoughts about her. Donna, who's played by Tracy Wright. I just wanted to mention her, and we'll talk about her in more detail, but she actually was married to Don McKellar after this movie, and she unfortunately passed away about a decade ago.
Yeah, which kind of makes certain plot elements of this movie a little bit more bitter in hindsight.
Absolutely.
I want to say that, like, it's funny. You look at Don McKellar and you look at her, and it's kind of like, no, you guys were probably. How do I phrase this? Like, I remember a friend telling me once that like the best couples kind of look related. And I looked at Don McKellar and I looked at Tracy and I was like, oh yeah, no, like
Fair enough. That's quite a way to put it.
I guess. I don't know if I'm leaving this in the episode, but I might. I'm just saying that like they like look like each other. So I could see them being married.
All right.
She's a phenomenal actress. She's
great.
incredible in this role.
She's great in this role. Absolutely.
I feel like this is a strength not just to the writing, but to her acting capabilities. I feel like this character could have very easily been like a wet blanket or like unlikable or just off-putting. But like she brings such a charm and such a charisma to it that you're just like, I love this woman.
I think there's kind of just a Canadian charm that just kind of, sits just above the surface of this whole movie and all the performances. That's really cool.
Yeah, I would agree.
So the last person that I want to mention is Patrick's sister, who makes a few appearances throughout the movie. She's played by Sarah Polley, who's a very big person in Hollywood. She's acted in a few movies like Dawn of the Dead, which is a movie that I actually really, really like. I think it's
the one Zack Snyder movie that we like.
Yes, in my opinion, Dawn of the Dead is Zack Snyder's best movie.
Okay.
I need to rewatch it because it's debatably one of my favorite movies of all time. Genuinely, it is a very good movie.
Okay.
And she just kind of recently, I guess maybe in the last 10, 15 years, she pivoted to more of a writing and directing kind of role. So she actually just released, I believe it was 2 years ago, a movie called Women Talking, which won an Oscar. And she actually won the Oscar for Best Screenplay.
Huh.
So she's a Canadian actor who has like a lot of notable success in Hollywood.
Okay, I didn't know that about her, but that's great. I'm happy for her.
Yeah, she's really cool. And then there's one other performance that I want to mention, and that is the French teacher who makes an appearance partway through the movie, played by Guinevere Bujold, who is a Canadian icon in her own right. The reason why I'm mentioning her is because this will be now the third time that I bring up the American movie Earthquake from 1974.
What the fuck, Blake? That's like 3 weeks in a row.
Literally
Stop trying to make Earthquake happen.
I don't know why. It's just like every movie it's relevant for some reason.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's so funny. So yeah, I mean, David Cronenberg and Don McKellar have a really deep relationship, and I believe like David Cronenberg kind of was a mentor to Don McKellar and a lot of other Canadian actors or directors of this era. So it's really cool that they got to work together on this, and then Don McKellar pops up in other of his movies over the last like 30 years. So who is this movie for, and does it hold up to a modern day watch?
That's a good question. I think it absolutely holds up. Like it's slightly dated in that way that a lot of late 90s content is just slightly dated through no fault of its own. But like in terms of like the pacing and the jokes and the, whatever, I think it is relatively timeless. Now, admittedly, there is some stuff about how like, trying to get a phone call. Like there's a scene where Sandra was like, I'll try his car phone. And I was like, car phones.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in the deep dive more, because cell phones, this is just in like the infancy of cell phones as well. And so there's some commentary about that's really interesting, because this movie does become a bit of a time capsule as well. And that was maybe part of the intent of the movie, was to be a little bit of a time capsule.
Potentially, yeah. So like, I don't know if any of these disenfranchised Zoomers can sit through a world without cell phones. But like you and I remember.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, again, I actually agree with you. This movie holds up shockingly well. Like, it's a very strong movie.
I should also say that, like, like, a lot of the times when you go back and you watch content from, like, it's funny. This is such a weird comparison, but, like, in my downtime, I've been watching some old Family Guy clips just, on YouTube when I feel like turning my brain off. And it is funny how I'm just like, wow, like, none of these jokes would fly now,
Right.
Like, right. But, like, for a movie made in 1998, like, it's pretty fine, like, there's nothing
Yeah.
super disagreeable about it.
So the only thing that I'll say is like, again, the film used for this movie is not the highest quality, and so there's a little bit of like weird graininess to it. Like it's not like 35 millimeter cool or anything like that. It's just kind of got this like weird filter over the whole movie, and I would
I'm
again.
not I'm not sure if that's the movie or just the shitty cut that's on YouTube.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is I think that shitty cut is more or less what the DVD cut looks like too. And so I'd love to see like an
Ah.
upscaled version of this because again, this is a really really underrated movie that's really good and a lot of people should see. Like I would say the only reason why you might not be super interested in this movie and why this movie I couldn't say is like for absolutely literally everybody is because there is some like nudity and some sexual content. It does deal with suicide in the film. Like, you know, that's stuff that not everybody is going to want in their film.
I
Uh,
suppose, yeah.
but apart from that, like, I think pretty much everybody 16, 18 and up should see this movie once in their lives, especially if you're Canadian, because this is like kind of iconic for Canada.
I feel like, and I'm gonna do it, Blake. I'm gonna do it. You can't stop me. I feel like this is a movie that gets better as you age too.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, because like there is a lot of just kind of, it's a fun, quirky movie, but there is kind of just these themes of like just loss and like wasted opportunities and regrets, and I just like not that you and I are super old, but as you move through life, you do kind of have more appreciation for like what these characters are going through.
Yeah, and it shows a lot of different perspectives and a lot of even like some of the minor characters get minor chances to shine. And some of the minor characters have some of the best dialogue in the whole movie, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, there's a couple characters that I'm going to mention in the deep dive in particular that I want to mention. And like you said as well, like this is a very character driven movie, right? And so like this is an apocalypse movie in a sense, but it's like drastically different from 90% of other apocalypse movies you've ever seen before.
as far as you know what, if we live to see the apocalypse and it looks like this, I think we'll be okay. I was kind of like watching it, I'm like, this is a pretty tame apocalypse considering.
Yeah. I mean, it's filmed in Canada. That's where some of the tameness is. But
oh, hey, sorry about your luck there, bud.
yeah. I guess the closest comparisons that I have for this movie are Seeking a Friend at the End of the World is like absolutely number one comparison because that movie's actually inspired by this movie.
Oh, is it? Oh, shit.
It is.
That's with Steve Carell and Keira Knightley, right?
Yes, I've seen it. I liked it quite a bit, but I don't have any memory of it. I think I liked it, and like, that's kind of as far as it went.
Cool.
It kind of got mixed reviews when it came out. And then there's also Don't Look Up, which came out a few years ago, which is significantly more political than this film is. I think that there's some like minor connections in terms of themes, but apart from that, like I think this movie and that movie are trying to achieve wildly different things.
Very different ends, yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the two absolute closest comparisons I could get because a lot of other like big apocalypse movies are more like apocalypse driven, I guess I would say.
Apocalyptic, you might say. A lot
Yeah.
of other apocalypse movies are more apocalyptic.
Yeah, they're a lot more cinematic and explosive, and kind of the characters are second to a lot of those films.
Yeah, and that's partly a certain feature of Canadian cinema, which we'll talk about next week.
Yeah.
Is the difference of like tone and focus.
Yeah, for sure. So the One Scene to Sell movie, I can't really give a one scene to sell the movie because there's like one clip online and it's the whole movie.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's the scene. Go watch it.
Yeah, so it's gonna be linked at the bottom anyway. So you should just go watch this movie because it's an hour and a half and it's amazing.
Woo.
So in terms of when to watch, like I got this. Honestly, you could watch this anytime. It's 90 minutes long. I like this on a Friday night the most, but that's
after
where...
after the work week has beaten the hope out of you. You need a little, you need a little uplifting.
I wasn't gonna say it, but yes.
That's why I'm here, Blake. I'm your id.
Yeah. And then where to watch, like I said, right now, really only easily available on YouTube, which I'll put the link below in our description. So yeah, that's last night, the primer episode. Anything else you want to say before we wrap her up?
No, just come back next week because I think you and I both have quite a bit to say about this movie, and I'm really, really happy that we're giving it some love because it is well deserved.
Well deserved. Cool. All right. Well, on that note, then tell your dad, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Cool. You need a break?
This has been Malik.
Perfect.
Never mind. We will workshop it and get back to you.